Hello, hello! Welcome back to Brenda's Books. Thank you for coming back to listen to more of Queen Andraya. If you would like to follow Brenda's Books online, I am on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Today we are on Chapter 10. Here we go. Chapter 10, Beachside, Confidant. Andraya blinked her eyes open and saw bright blue ones staring back at her. Your Majesty, can you hear me? Andraya nodded against the hard ground beneath her head, then realized she was lying flat on her back. She gasped and sat up in haste, then regretted it as her vision whirled in heavy circles. She clutched her head with her hands. Easy there, Steffan said, steadying her. Andraya closed her eyes and took a few deep breaths. When she opened them again, the world remained still as it should. They sat atop a lengthy hill, not too far from the shore and the crashing waves of the ocean. The setting sun cast streams of various colors low in the sky. She glanced behind her and saw a wide, dusty walking path, north of which jutted a steep mountain sprouting with small juniper trees. What happened? And why are we here? You fainted, Steffan replied. I brought you here to get you away from all the commotion. What about Chestnut? Andraya cried. Do you really think I would abandon your horse, Your Majesty? He gestured with his head in the opposite direction. There stood Chestnut, grazing on the side of the dirt path, perfectly at ease. Andraya sighed in relief. What about the children? Are they all right? I must have given them quite a shock. They were worried about you, the lot of them, Steffan said, as he scooted to sit beside her. It is quite fascinating that it only took mere seconds for them to adore you. Andraya wanted to grin at that, but the prince beamed so brightly at her that all she could do was blush. She turned away quickly and shifted so that her ankles were together to the right side of her. Steffan lifted his knees where he rested his arms. They protested quite profusely, some even with tears, when I carried you away. But I told them I would take good care of you. Andraya glanced at him again, to see his smile a little less sure. Andraya smiled shyly in return. How strange. She never felt shy. She glimpsed at Chestnut again, who nuzzled a flowering weed. Thank you, she whispered. It was my honor, Steffan said with assurance. Andraya turned to face him more directly. I am so sorry for the trouble I have caused you. It is no trouble, my queen, he said, looking completely serious. I am just relieved you are all right. Tell me, when was the last time you had something to eat? Andraya pondered that a moment as she looked out at the ocean. Honestly, I do not remember. Did you eat any time today? Andraya shook her head slowly. No, my lady-in-waiting woke me up in the library this morning, and then— The library? You slept there? Not by choice. I had much to study prior to our meeting today. Steffan frowned. So you are running on no sleep and no food. What about the day previous? Did you eat yesterday? Andraya tilted her head to look at the sky as she racked her brain to yesterday's events, which felt like ages ago. I do not believe so. Steffan let out a frustrated sigh. Why ever not? Andraya shrugged lightly. I forgot. Steffan raised his eyebrows in dismay. Forgot? Yes, Andraya said with slight exasperation. I have been incredibly busy since I was sworn in as head crown. You have no idea the pressure I feel. Steffan offered a sympathetic frown. She looked away, embarrassed she had said so much. She stood and took a few steps down the path. She rubbed her arms in the ocean chill as she stared blankly at the water. Steffan approached her from behind. I understand pressure, but I cannot imagine the kind you must be under. He lifted a careful hand and rested it on her shoulder. But you still must take care of yourself. Andraya spun around to face him, causing his hand to fall. I told you, I just forgot. Then the world started to spin. Andraya lifted a hand to her head. Please, we must keep you off your feet, Steffan said, as he assisted her in sitting down again. At least your ailment is easily remedied. After you rest some more, we must get you back to the palace. Our impromptu escapade did not prepare us to stay out here long. I'm sorry for that, Andraya said, as she shivered in the wind. "You do not need to apologize," said the prince, as he shrugged out of his suit coat and placed it over her shoulders. The queen happily soaked in the warmth. She tucked her ankles closer to her and dug her toes into the earth. Then she gasped. "Did the children see my feet when you carried me away? Or anyone else? Oh, dear me," she moaned. "First the queen comes marching into a port unannounced, wearing this dress," she gestured toward herself, "not to mention wind-tossed hair, and a muddy hem, and no shoes." She groaned again and plopped her face in her hands. Steffan laughed out loud. "It is not funny," Andraya mumbled into her palms, but Steffan continued to chuckle. She threw him a sharp look. The prince cleared his throat. "I made certain your feet were covered, my queen. I knew you would be appalled if anyone were to see them. And I do not know how, but you haven't a hair out of place. And regardless of your muddy hem, your dress is stunning. So please." He grabbed her hand and sandwiched them in between both of his. "Please do not worry." Andraya stared down at their folded fingers. Steffan bit his lip and pulled away, placing his arms on his knees again. They sat in silence for a long minute, and just stared at the crashing waves. Andraya closed her eyes and breathed in the salty air. "May I ask you a question?" Steffan asked, breaking the silence. Andraya opened her eyes. Steffan was in the same position, but had shifted his entire body to face her completely. "You may ask me anything," the queen said. "I may choose not to answer, however." Steffan grinned at that. "Fair enough. What was the subject of your urgent letters to Medine?" Andraya took a deep breath. "My governess, who raised me, has pneumonia and is not expected to live long. I think Dr. Mason might be able to help her, so I'm sending for her to come to Chaldrea." Steffan lifted his eyebrows. "A very noble act." Andraya thought of how severely she had hurt Colleen. "It is not so noble," she said quietly. "She is the mother of my lady-in-waiting. Now, no matter what happens, at least they will get to see each other again." Steffan offered her a most curious look, and the queen had not the faintest idea what it meant. "So, you two must have grown up together." Andraya nodded as she smiled at the memories. "Miss Colleen is very humble and sweet." Steffan smiled. "Are you two still friends?" Andraya started. "What? Are you two friends?" he asked again. Andraya hesitated but nodded slowly. Steffan beamed at that. "That is wonderful." Andraya bit her lip and looked away. She had certainly confided in the prince too much. She shifted and faced the ocean again. The prince did the same and scooted closer to her, but she paid him no heed as a wretched memory of Gordon inadvertently flooded her mind. They were walking outside among the many tree lines of autumn leaves as part of the New Season's festival, as the tradition held. All the royal council meandered together, along with dozens of foreign royal guests. "Can you believe my wife, just this very morning, told me she had climbed a tree not a year ago?" Gordon boomed for all to hear. "Of all the preposterous things a princess could do, she is so ill-educated, is she not?" "That comes with the breeding of Medine," a nearby nobleman had said. "Indeed," said Gordon. "Is it not a fine thing that she has me to teach her how to behave?" And all those fine noblemen, who had far too much wine that evening, snorted and snickered at her. Andraya was pleased with her retort. "And I suppose, gentlemen, that drunkenness shows explicitly your fine graces on the art of propriety." But this only caused the lot of them to bellow more with gurgling laughter. "Do you feel unwell again?" Steffan asked. Andraya blinked rapidly as the prince pulled her out of her reverie. "Yes," she admitted, not telling him it was for a very different reason. But somehow Steffan seemed to sense it. "Is there something else distressing you, my queen?" Steffan asked, in almost a whisper. "I do not wish to discuss it." "Is it I?" Andraya shook her head. "No." She turned and peered at the prince, the man who had assisted her without question in making it to the port on time, the man who saved her from public scorn without initiative by covering her feet, the man who had a candid, kind conversation with her on the beach. However, she still could not help worrying that somehow all of this would come back to bite her. The prince was so different than any other royal she had ever met. So different, in fact, that it caused suspicions to rise within her. Steffan peered back at her with a questioning look. Those eyes of his! She hated how much she loved them. But it did not matter. Andraya would never get close to another man again. She had that power now. She only wished she could find something wicked about the prince at present. She hated that she liked him so much. Then her breath caught when she thought of something. She stifled a wicked grin. "You have deceived me, your highness." Steffan's eyebrows shot up. "How so, my queen?" "You speak Chaldean not only fluently, but perfectly. And you caused me to believe otherwise. What is your reason for this?" Steffan chuckled. "What do you mean?" "I mean, when we were at the palace you could not quite form your sentences, and ever since we jumped on horseback you have spoken with remarkable ease." Steffan stared at her with curiosity. "I am not quite certain if you are teasing me right now." "I assure you that I am not, sir." Steffan cocked his head in bewilderment. "Well, what do you have to say for yourself?" Steffan chortled some more as he put a palm up to Andraya's forehead. "Are you certain you are feeling all right?" Andraya batted his hand away. "Why will you not answer me?" Steffan grinned. "My queen, have you not noticed that we have been speaking Medianese this entire time?" Andraya started. It was true. They had been speaking her first language. "But you speak Medianese?" Steffan laughed. "I do. You sparked the idea for me to do so when you mentioned Besnik should tutor us. I do not know why I did not think of it sooner, since I have always known you grew up in Medine." Andraya could not help but stare at the prince in awe. "How many of the island languages do you speak?" "All of them except Gaulish, and not quite Chaldean yet." Andraya's jaw dropped. "That is remarkable, your highness." Steffan offered a small smile. "Thank you. Since I have never been first in line to the Deldrian throne, I have had more opportunity to devote my time to study and travel. However, when it comes to being remarkable, I believe you win." Andraya shook her head. "Not so." "Indeed so," Steffan countered. "I could never silence an entire room of rowdy noblemen the way you did." "When did you discover that talent of yours?" Andraya shrugged. "Since I was old enough to want to remember things." "And you frown because—" Andraya shrugged again. "Some things I wish I could forget." Steffan cringed at that. "You and I both." Then abruptly he laughed out loud. "What is it now?" Andraya asked. "You stand up to your bullish nobility like a lion, but the possibility of children seeing your toes makes you wither." He laughed some more. Andraya smacked his chest with the back of her hand, which only made him laugh harder. "It is time to go," Andraya announced, getting to her feet. Steffan stood too, still chuckling. "If you wish." Andraya walked over to Chestnut, who was still grazing happily. The prince kept stride with her. "Would you please assist me again, since I am obviously not in riding attire?" Andraya asked, once they reached her horse. "Certainly, but first—" He paused and turned to face her. Their eyes met, and he didn't speak again. "Yes?" Andraya prodded. Steffan blinked, then cleared his throat. "I am sorry you have been unwell, but I have enjoyed our time together." Part of the queen wanted to say, "This is all the time you will ever get." But the other part of her won over, and she said, "I have as well." The prince smiled in return, and lifted her onto the horse by her waist. "I better sit behind you," he said, as he jumped up to do just that. "This way I can catch you if you faint again. The last thing I want is you falling off a horse." "Then I get the reins," Andraya said. Steffan patted Chestnut's side as he smiled at the queen. "If you wish." The queen stared at him in astonishment. "What is it?" asked the prince. "I expected you to protest." "He is your horse, your majesty." "Yes, but—" She stared at him some more. Why should he not agree? After all, she was the head crown, and that is how it should be. But it was so peculiar to not have him even pose an argument. Steffan's brows furrowed. "Am I breaching something cultural again? I am happy to take the reins if you would like." "Heavens no," Andraya replied. She faced forward, and took the reins, leading Chestnut down the dirt path. And that concludes Chapter 10. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you come back next Thursday for Chapter 11. In the near future, I'm hoping to add a little bit of insight into how Gordon used to be. So that will be fun. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful week and a wonderful Easter if you celebrate it. And I hope you and yours are happy and healthy and safe. If you want to find out more about Brenda's books, you can visit brendasbooks.net. Until next time, take care.